because as much as I do love writing, I also write for other reasons. I write because I want to see it made. I write because I want to have my writing affect people or have it bring them joy or laughter or sadness. I write because I want, to leave something behind in the world. And every time you talk to aspiring people in the entertainment industry, whether it's writers or producers or anyone, they always have really interesting questions that definitely kind of make you think about like your own personal journey and where you come from and where you want to go and all of that. And one of the things that came up was, how do you as a writer deal with the constant knowledge that so much of what you do will never be read or seen by anyone? And yeah, look at that face, that lovable face. And it's the reality is that as a screenwriter, that's the truth. That most of what you write will never be read by more than a handful of people. And
why is that?
Well,
discuss why that is.
Well, I mean, the first reason is that unlike novelists or even playwrights, most screenplays don't get published. Now, there is actually publication of screenplays that have been produced. In fact, it's, I think, part of our contract that they publish our screenplays. Although I couldn't tell you, I guess you could probably go on Amazon, and any movie that's been produced there, in theory, should be a publication of it. Although they really only have to pay you the publication fee. I don't think it requires them to actually publish the material.
Right, that's correct.
So that's the first reason. Most screenplays just don't get published. The second reason is most screenplays don't get made. The vast majority of screenplays will never get made. The third reason is,
from a slightly legal point of view, when you say pitch a screenplay before having written it, or you go on, or you do an open writing assignment, you're not really allowed to share that screenplay.
No.
Because you don't own it. You don't
even technically after you sell it, you're not supposed to continue to share it.
Yeah.
But the other reality, I think, is that most screenplays don't sell.
Yeah.
So between most of your work not selling and then the stuff that does sell, most of it will never get made. And then the stuff that does get made, very unlikely will ever get published. The odds of anyone ever actually reading your work are very slim.
Yeah.
There are the people that work on the project that will read it. There are your friends and family. There are your trusted screenwriter friends that you want notes from, or your representation. There's potentially a competition or that you submit it to, but there really isn't like a forum out there.
Yeah, even the scripts on the blacklist should not be shared. I know that Franklin Leonard, towards the in December when the blacklist comes out, was really upset because someone had tweeted a link to a Google Drive.
Yes,
where all of the blacklist scripts were. I mean, here's the thing: screenwriters are kind of sharing those anyway. Because they just
not I, said the fly. No,
amongst screenwriters they do, but I think he was very upset because this was very publicly being shared on Twitter. 60 odd screenplays that are in development at major studios, and he was like, "This is a big no." But everyone knows you're sharing those.
And of those 60 odd screenplays, not all of them are going to get made.
No.
Not even half of them will probably get made.
No, if that.
Yeah.
And
now there are websites out there.
Statistics of blacklisted screenplays.
How many scripts actually get made?
You know, I think it's very good for people to place on the blacklist. It does wonders for people's careers. But yeah, you know, I mean, there, you know, several movies that have topped the blacklist that, I mean, I think probably most of them haven't been made. But I'd be intrigued with statistics.
Yeah, that would be an interesting statistic to do. But I think, you know, the question remains, which is,
how do you deal with it?
The truth is that you will spend, as you've watched us now spend, many hours crafting characters, stories, structure. You put together a world and lore. You then laboriously choose those words for the page.
Yeah.
Putting all of your time and energy and passion and creative flow into what ultimately becomes a document. A document that no one will read. So, what do? How do we continue? Because if you think about that, in any other profession,
I mean, if you were an author and you had written a book that you weren't even going to self-publish,
right?
You know, you'd be like, well, why the hell did I do that?
I mean, look, sometimes hobbyists will do these things for their own personal, like, I did that. I wanted to write a book in my life. I wrote a book in my life now. And I think that's wonderful. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about professionally. This is your life's work. I mean one day...
There probably are. There probably are. I mean, I would say that there are games that go into development and are developed for a long period of time that never see the light of day.
Games?
Video games. I know of several that were like, oh, this is being worked on, and then it never comes out. Because reasons. Funding dries up, whatever. You know, I'm sure there are numerous projects. I'm sure the amount of R&D, of research and development funds that Apple has on products that were abandoned because they just didn't make muster. You know, I'm sure in technology it happens a lot. So I wouldn't say that it's the only profession where that happens. I suspect it happens a lot of the time in lots of different things.
If I said only, I think I meant one of the only. Because most professions aren't that way. Most professions, if your passion is whether it be medicine or law or business or finance or education or whatever, the work that you do is experienced and appreciated by the work, by the people, not only that it's intended for, but, you know, you can have the fulfillment of seeing that work finished, you know, utilized in the way that it's intended to be utilized. You know, yes, I'm sure there's lots of types of creative things that never see anything. And that's what I mean. I think creative professions, in more than others, tend to have this kind of experience. But I would actually even say, if you were a professional painter, and I don't mean an aspiring painter, because it's not what I'm talking about. So let's be clear. Like, as an aspiring anything, you can't count on your work being seen. Right? But if you were a professional painter or a professional musician, and most of what you either painted or recorded was never displayed to the public, it would be pretty disheartening, I think. It doesn't necessarily mean that it will all be successful or that it will or that it will, but it goes out into the world. You know, for better or for worse, it goes out into the world. You know, now, people who develop video games, I think there's, yes, you could say, yes, lots of things get developed. Video games are a very interesting thing because you'll work on one of those games for years and years and years.
Years.
The odds of you working, I would guess, and I don't know any actual video game developers to test this on, but if you had a career in video game development that spanned 30 years, probably more of your projects get made than not. Because the number of games that go through massive development and then get dropped.
I suspect so, but I genuinely don't know. I'd be really intrigued. In fact, one of my neighbors works for Bungie in Bungie's communications department. I might ask him if they have had
how many games in development actually get released?
Because of course they cost a lot of money to develop.
Yes.
And of course, it would never be the intention of going down the road on a certain project. And then, I mean,
here's the other thing
that we're talking about the Horsemen of the Apocalypse, because I remember in like the early 2000s, big Xbox fan in the early 2000s used to buy Xbox magazine, and there was a really cool Horsemen of the Apocalypse game that was being tracked, and there was artwork coming out every month and screen grabs, and then it was announced, hey, this game's not coming out now. Right. I remember that really well. And so I'm sure it happens.
Yeah. With what's interesting about something like that, that's different from what we do, is there's hundreds of people that work on those games.
Absolutely.
And guess what? All of them have read your work.
Yeah.
If there's a movie that everybody famously knows now, Batgirl, that will never get released.
I know.
At least as of right now, it will never get released. And that's got to be really, really hard for all those people. And yet, at the very least, all the people that worked on that movie know and have read and have experienced the screenplay that writer wrote. Or have watched or experienced parts of that movie.
Right.
What we do goes out to 20 people.
Yeah.
And then no one else ever sees it again.
Potentially, yeah. And that's even if something sells.
Yeah. And so I think there's a different level of having to come to terms with this need for like inner satisfaction. That is really, 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 really hard. People talk about writing just for the love of writing, and I struggle with that all the time, because as much as I do love writing, I also write for other reasons. I write because I want to see it made. I write because I want to have my writing affect people or have it bring them joy or laughter or sadness. I write because I want to leave something behind in the world. All of those things. If I don't just write to have it in my head on my computer, that's not why I do it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Some people genuinely just love the practice of living in their imagination, and that's enough for them. But if that was it, then maybe I'd be okay with no one ever reading our work. But at a certain point, you do have to go, like, the question that as I was talking through this last night at the LA Film School, I said, we have sold in the last 9 years, it's been about 9 years, I think close to 20 projects. One has been made.
Yeah.
One.
Yeah.
Now, that's not to say that we've had a great career. We love what we do. We've worked with wonderful people. But, most of those scripts that we have written, even professionally, leave out all the ones that didn't sell or all the ideas that didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But most of those scripts will never get read by anyone again.
Yeah.
And they were, that's 9 years of work.
Right.
Of passion, of creative energy, of putting that out there, putting taking those risks emotionally and everything else. And somehow we've managed to stay sane. But I
think you have to release. Yeah, I mean, in answer to the question, I think you have to release you getting external validation from a large group of people as being part of your job satisfaction. I think you do have to find the excitement and the passion for the writing of it. But I think a lot of one's satisfaction in this job does come from that, as opposed, and also, I'll be honest, getting paid really nicely to do it.
Yeah, I mean, look, money is always great. You get validation from that.
You get validation.
Validation from a sale is wonderful because it means enough people liked it to buy it.
Yeah.
But, it's not like we could just go out as a musician and go play at a coffee shop and have a bunch of people smile and say how good it was.
Totally.
Or take an acting class and get some validation from friends. And
here's the thing: the reason I segued away from being an actor was because I wasn't getting the ability I felt to be hugely creative on potentially a daily basis.
And that is true. You have to be. I mean, it is kind of also one of the benefits of being a writer, right? Like no one can tell us that we can't do it.
Yeah,
I mean, that's one of the great freedoms of being a writer is that we work for ourselves. We're entrepreneurs. I don't have a boss telling me that I'm not allowed to write today. Just doesn't exist, and that's absolutely fantastic. But it also just means it comes with everything else that I just talked about.
Completely, absolutely.
So it's interesting to kind of go like, is there a method? Is there a technique? Is there something that people do to deal with that? And that's the question that I was asked. And I don't have a great answer for it.
I don't either. I mean, again, I just think it's like, as I was saying earlier, your validation isn't going to come from that daily thing of, I think you have to find an inner validation.
But isn't it like we've talked, and we were just talking about it earlier today on a phone call, about how so much of our career isn't even the writing part.
I know.
And how the day-to-day of being a screenwriter professionally is maybe 25% actually putting fingers to keys.
Is that,
I like to be, I'm going to keep it at 25%.
Fine.
Just to make myself feel good.
Yeah.
But 25% being your wife can't hear anything. Can anyone else?
I know, but other people can because Jacob.
I don't know. I can hear you just fine, by the way.
Thanks.
So I feel like, when only 25% is the writing, right? Well, that means 75% isn't even that thing that you're talking about, well, you just have to find joy in that.
Yeah.
Well, that's not what it is.
What is it? It's
right.
Coming up with pitches, it's discussing ideas. Yeah.
And there's joy. There's joy that comes with that. I was just talking about, what was it, this morning, how excited I am about the two projects that we're currently working on right now. And then I feel I get that kind of like giddy, like, ooh, I like that idea that we just came up with.
Sure.
And I think it's about finding enough in those small moments to sustain the passion.
Yeah.
Because, when people ask me about like, well, how do you get a career in screenwriting? Sometimes it's that broad. It really is about passion. The 3 P's: passion, patience, and persistence. And and you have to sustain that passion.
Yes.
You have to be.
And it has to be almost, it's not almost, it has to be self-generated.
It has to be self-generated. And you have to keep the persistence of you keep writing, even if no one is reading it.
Yeah.
and you keep writing and you keep writing and you keep writing. And, you know, at the funny thing is, like, and it really is like, this is another, I would say, unique aspect to screenwriting versus any other even art form. In any other art form, it is very rare, although I'm sure it happens sometimes, for someone to create a piece of art and then, before it is ever shown to the public, 1,000 people change that piece of art. So there is, even when you have the blessed experience of having one of your screenplays go out into the world where everyone can see and watch it, it's actually, it's not yours anymore. So from the moment you sell it to the moment it's released, it has been touched and picked over and painted over and sung over and every other thing you can think of for months and months and months and months on end, until the final product comes out. And how many people will go back and read that original script?
Totally.
No one.
Not really anyone.
No one. And even if the script was nominated for an award, it wouldn't be the original one. It would be the one that got picked over all those times.
Absolutely right. You know, it's really interesting, isn't it? Like, you know, we're about to have the Oscars, and, you know, I would be really intrigued to know if the awards for, you know, best screenplay this year, how many of those were worked on by other people. I'm sure a lot. I mean, maybe I know it happens a little less.
Maybe the indie ones, or if there's writer directors in there. I honestly don't know who's nominated.
You know, but like Top Gun Maverick, we know. I mean, I don't.
There's so many credited writers on that.
So many credited writers, and there are a bunch of people who Jacob's writing to us. We'll talk about that in a moment. So many uncredited writers on Top Gun, and that's nominated for best movie. You know, and that all these people who may have work still in the movie, but whose work didn't qualify for credit. You know,
it is I really do think it's a unique challenge that a screenwriter faces, that I can't think of another creative or even regular profession whereby the work that you do involves as much commitment and like putting yourself out there in such a vulnerable way, only to then have no one else ever experience that. It's fascinating, and also it is part of the job.
It's part of the job.
And it was, you know, another question that was asked of me last night was, have you ever been fired? And the reality is, the answer is yes. And the other answer that I told these students was, everyone in Hollywood probably gets fired.
Everyone gets
fired.
And
if you don't like getting fired, don't be a screenwriter.
Everyone gets fired.
And being fired in Hollywood is usually more along the lines of being replaced or not having your next step activated.
It's not indicative of your talent.
Yes.
No, I mean, for example, we were replaced on our very first screenplay sale by two writers who themselves were replaced on an enormous movie, and who now have a huge television.
I mean, that was in the press. It was J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay. They wrote the next draft of Winter's Night. It was announced when it happened. We found out in the trades, if you remember.
Totally, I do.
Nobody told us that we had been fired.
We read about it.
And that's another thing that you should know as a screenwriter, is that nobody even
might not tell you what's going on.
And all of a sudden, we get a Deadline article. It pops up. It's Winter's Night. Oh, my God. Oh, wait. We were replaced. And it's by these guys, J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, who, by the way, are wonderful guys. And we had a great relationship with them.
We did.
And they've gone on to now be the showrunners of Lord of the Rings. And that's wonderful for them. But, you know, I remember actually being very, very butthurt about that. Very upset. You know, about being fired off of that.
not with them, but just
No.
just with the circumstances, the way it
Well,
happened.
we had never been through it before. It was the first. It was our first big sale, and it was our first time being let go of what was an original. I mean, we had that movie changed our lives. So to get let go from that was really hard. And then to know at that point that the script that we sold, that was everything that we put into it, would never be the thing that got translated to the screen.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And we knew, because we'd heard multiple things about the way the notes and things that were changing, it was not going to be the same. It would have been, I'm sure, still similar. But the version of that movie that we had invested so much of our lives into and had sacrificed so much to get written, was, there were 30, 40 people that read it.
Maybe.
The people that it went out to around town, probably some other people since that are reps.
Some people have still read it since then.
But it's certainly never going to get published anywhere.
Right. Actually, these comments, Jacob. Hello, Jacob. Good to see you, dude. The hardest part of screenwriting is lack of continued direct validation. Agreed. A very small amount of people see it and rarely obsess about it the way they do a good book. Absolutely right. And yes, Jacob says, "What, you're going to calling this movie Hellfire?" Yes, we are.
So far, it's our working title. We didn't have one.
Maybe Jacob didn't see the episode the other day, but Jacob, we showed the art that you created.
Yes.
Okay, on the show.
We shared your amazing artwork with our audience.
Out live on air.
And we decided
it's right here.
Yeah, we decided that, it's a great title, and as a working title, fucking works.
It works.
So speaking of Hellfire,
let's jump in.
That.
Yeah.
Do some writing.